Okay, looking at the third one, this line is slightly curved to represent an increase in speed. The line displays the object moving more and more faster as time goes on. So unlike the linear graph, this graph that is slightly curved will represent an increase. So if you stop at, for an example, here and here, the second point where you stop on would be the average speed would be much greater than this part because there's an increase. The opposite of this would be this graph, and this graph is slightly curved to represent a decrease in speed. The line displays an object moving more and more slower as the time goes on. So unlike the third one, if you calculate this point of average speed, it would be much greater than the point here because the speed decreases. So Newton's laws. Newton's laws are three fundamental laws formulated by Sir Isaac Newton to describe the motion of objects and the forces acting upon them. So Newton's first law is a body at rest will remain at rest and a body in motion will remain in motion unless it is acted upon by an external force. So an example would be a toy car, where a toy car will remain at rest if there is no force pushed on, and a toy car in motion will remain in motion unless it is acted upon by an external force. However, you might be noticing that, let's say you push a toy car and the toy car is in motion. However, on Earth, the toy car would not stay in motion forever. It will eventually come to stop without you needing to stop it, because the external force in this would be a non-contact force, which is friction. So even if there is no physical touch or physical force that needs to get in contact with the toy car, there's still an existing force of friction, which can automatically put a toy car in rest after being in motion. And the second law is the force acting on an object is equal to the mass of that object times its acceleration. This is a commonly shown equation in physics or any physical science, which is force equals mass times object. Oh, mass times acceleration. Finally, Newton's third law is for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Moving on to friction. Friction is the force resisting the relative motion of solid surfaces, fluid layers, and material elements sliding against each other. So there are multiple types of friction, such as static friction, sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. So static friction is when all of the objects are on a surface are at rest and there is no motion. So, for an example, when you're playing basketball, there's static friction between your shoes and the ground. And without this feature, everything would slip. Sliding friction is friction that acts on objects as they are sliding. So an example would be there's sliding friction between pen and paper, which is when there's just enough friction between pen and the paper to leave a mark. Rolling friction is when friction acts on objects that are rolling over the surface. An example would be many transportation using wheels, such as cars, buses, bicycles, because they all use rolling friction. Finally, fluid friction is when friction acts on objects that are moving through a fluid surface. For an example, if you push your hand through the water, there is fluid friction. So that's the end of the unit, but there are some crucial unit vocabulary to take away. So I will be basically reviewing those. So first, motion. Motion is the change in position of an object over time. Force is a push or pull that could change the motion or shape of an object. Newtons is the unit of the unit that could measure force named after Isaac Newton. Contact forces are forces that require physical contact between objects, such as applied force, friction force, spring force, and tension force. Non-contact forces is the opposite of contact forces, which is a force that act at a distance without physical contact, such as electrostatic force, magnetic force, and gravity force. Balanced forces are forces that are equal in magnitude and opposite in direction, which will eventually result in no change in an object's motion. Unbalanced forces, on the other hand, are forces that are not equal in magnitude or opposite in direction, causing a change in an object's motion. Distance is the amount of space between two objects or 2 points. Speed is the rate at which an object moves, measured as the distance traveled per unit of time. Acceleration is a term to describe an increase in speed or positive acceleration. Deceleration is a term that would be used to describe a decrease in speed or negative acceleration. Increase is to make something larger or greater in quantity or value, and decrease would be to make something less or reduce its quantity or value. The Newton's laws are 3 fundamental laws formulated by Isaac Newton to describe the motion of objects and the forces acting upon them. Friction is the force that opposes motion or attempted motion between two surfaces in contact. Static friction is friction that prevents two stationary surfaces from sliding past each other. Sliding friction is friction that occurs when two surfaces slide against each other. And rolling friction is friction that occurs when an object rolls over a surface. And finally, fluid friction is friction that occurs when an object moves through fluid, such as water. So that would conclude the unit notes for the first unit, which is forces and interactions of physical science.